Hogwarts, Muggle Fraudster Outshines Wizards with Deception. Like, share and subscribe. Episode 106, Let Them Respect Me. It is better to let them fear me. About my bloodline. The principal's room was quiet, and the portraits hanging on the wall looked curiously, looking at Lewis, the legendary descendant of Merlin's bloodline, Lewis Excian, and said that it really came. This should be regarded as a review, right? After all, Merlin's bloodline descendants sound much more powerful than Voldemort, and it is estimated that Dumbledore is also afraid that he will become the second Voldemort. However, since Dumbledore believed in his identity as a descendant of Merlin's bloodline, he naturally had to accept the pressure from this identity, and Lewis had long been mentally prepared. Yes, Mr. Wilson, your bloodline power seems to be very hidden. Dumbledore said if none of Merlin's bloodline descendants could be recorded in the Book of Access, who else was eligible? But the Book of Access did not have Lewis's name, so Dumbledore could only venture to guess that it was the peculiarities of Merlin's bloodline that made the Book of Access ignore him. There must be a way to correct the name of the Book of Access, otherwise who will dare to believe it in the future? Is it? Maybe there is, but I didn't pay attention, Lewis replied casually. So have you noticed when you have changed significantly? Dumbledore asked. Do you feel like magic bursting? Magic bursts are something that every young wizard has experienced, and at a certain age, fluctuations in the mind will cause magic to explode and affect the things around them. This problem occurs frequently after the age of 11, and learning magic is limited unless instructed, which is why young wizards enter school at 11. And the magic burst is essentially something that must happen during the wizard's age, and some small wizards with special bloodlines will have a slight difference. But Lewis's bloodline is too special. Maybe there will be an additional outbreak in it? Could it even be that this outbreak process took place inside Hogwarts? Appeared without anyone knowing? This is Dumbledore's guess. After all, judging from Fawkes's performance, Lewis was significantly different when he first entered the school, and now, how would he know that Lewis's change was the moment he had just fooled Fawkes, because of the growth of achievement? If it weren't for this achievement, Lewis would have been roasted by the Phoenix. Sorry, I didn't notice the magic burst you said. Lewis shrugged, then took the opportunity to ask rhetorically, do you have any thoughts on that? This is pure idle talk, and at the same time it is blocking Dumbledore's mouth, to make him okay not to guess. Anyway, throughout the Harry Potter episodes, there has never been any Merlin bloodline, so he is very calm, because he is a scorpion poison, only, and he is not afraid of being exposed at all. Your bloodline is very special. It can even be said that it is unique. We do not have any reference objects. Okay, but what does it have to do with you looking for me? Do you want to study me? Lewis asked, looking at Dumbledore. Dumbledore excelled in alchemy and was the discoverer and arranger of the many uses of dragon's blood. Could it be that he wanted to study the 20 uses of Merlin's bloodline? Dumbledore immediately denied. Of course not, you are free, no one is qualified to study you, but what? However, your presence will inevitably make other wizards sensitive. Some may be curious, some will appreciate you, but they may also be jealous of your power, and even want to take you for themselves, Dumbledore said. Of course, Lewis knew that Dumbledore was right, but who was he afraid of? Take it for yourself? Lewis laughed. Sounds like you're trying to recruit me? Dumbledore said in a deep voice. That is the softest means, more likely to be inducement or even coercion. Inducements, bullying? Lewis smiled. You don't seem worried at all? Dumbledore looked at Lewis's smile and was a little puzzled. There is a headmaster, what are you afraid of? You are the most powerful wizard, Lewis said. Dumbledore shook his head, wanted to stop talking, and finally spoke to obviously change the subject. Mr. Wilson, maybe you should start with yourself, such as making more friends. Make friends? Of course, I'm serious about making friends. Lewis spread his hands. Then can you not bully your classmates? Dumbledore asked. Sure enough, someone has sued, right, Mr. Principal, just say who it is. I promise he will become my friend. Lewis grinned, showing a mouthful of white Simpson's teeth. What is it called? Will definitely become your friend, whether you plan to coerce or induce, quickly collect the magic power. Dumbledore couldn't hold his expression anymore, and he kind of arrested Lewis on the spot so that he wouldn't cause harm. No one has sued, Mr. Wilson, and your actions are obvious to all, Dumbledore said. I just hope you can be nice to them. I should be very friendly. Lewis looked at Dumbledore with a smile. I generally don't provoke others except when others mess with me. Your pumpkin clown? Oh, that was an accident. I didn't expect the other boys in Slytherin to be afraid of it, you see, didn't I continue? It was just a holiday surprise, Lewis explained. That's a fine explanation, Dumbledore asked after a moment of silence. What does Mr. Wilson want to do in the future? Do what? Yes, such as what kind of work you want to do. Have you ever thought about staying in school or? I will most likely stay in the Muggle world in the future, although magic is amazing, but I think it is difficult for me to adapt to this backward life. Lewis looked at the fireplace and dim oil lamp in the headmaster's room, and shook his head with disgust. But the world of magic is better for you, isn't it? Your magic and strangeness are hard for Muggles to accept you. Dumbledore said. It depends on wisdom, Mr. Headmaster. It only takes a little white lie to make others accept their magic, such as I am a magician, and it is normal to be magical. Lewis shrugged. But I don't agree with you saying that the wizarding world is backward, after all. Dumbledore wanted to say something but was interrupted by Lewis. Headmaster Dumbledore, I need to tell you before you describe the wizarding world. Lewis shook his finger. Our information is not equal. You don't know the Muggle world, but I know the wizarding world fairly well. After all, it's in the books. Besides, I'm a child of a normal Muggle family. I have parents who love me. They love me and will fulfill all my desires, and I love them and are willing to do a lot for them. I'm different from Harry Potter. He didn't have a good life at his uncle's house, and I have the most say in this. After all, I can see him doing housework almost every day and being treated coldly. Lewis spoke casually, as if it were just small talk. He must love the wizarding world because it has his best memories here, right? Mr. Principal, is this the same as you envisioned? Dumbledore watched Lewis's gaze drift. He hesitated, and considered whether he should use Dementors to read Lewis's thoughts. This was contrary to his moral values, but the identity of the person in front of him made him hesitate. In the end, he gave up and stuck to his ideas. This is a very great person. Always use morality to restrain their behavior. If a normal person has this ability to read minds, I am afraid that he will not care about the slightest use for his own profit, right? Both Dumbledore and Snape did this very well, but the reasons for the two are different. Dumbledore has a good sense of morality, and Snape is purely wantless. Snape had no idea but to bully students from other houses. But what Dumbledore didn't know was that even if he used the Dementor to read anything, because he didn't look at Lewis's eyes at all, but at the position twisted by illusion, there was Lewis's eyebrows. Dementoring is invincible, and this ability to directly probe the human brain has no prevention method except brain closure unless you can't see your eyes. The Dementor can only read his mind when he looks directly into the target's eye, and Lewis can't control himself from looking at the other person once. But he can use illusion to mislead the other person into mistaking the position of his eyes. So that if you can read something, there are ghosts. Well, everyone has their own ideas, but I have a little suggestion, Mr. Wilson. Dumbledore, who did not try to read Lewis's thoughts, smiled at Lewis. Why be nice to your classmates? They may be your help in the future. I don't agree with this, Mr. 01 Chief. Lewis pouted. Do you really think that their senses about me can influence their attitude towards me in the future? You can elaborate. Dumbledore looked at Lewis with interest. Pure-blood families are like Muggle nobles, and because of their small numbers, the relationship is even more intertwined. Lewis's voice was low. Friendship is not as reliable as a pure-blood family, and when other families who are related to them want to treat me badly, do you think those classmates who are close to me will really choose to help me? Dumbledore was silent for a moment. Actually, there are still some special people. Dumbledore couldn't go on himself. Does this need to be said? In most cases, of course, not. It seems that you also understand, Headmaster. Lewis smiled. So, instead of having a good relationship with them in vain for the almost impossible help, it is better to give them enough psychological shadow to make them afraid of me. Lewis's eyes flashed with a cold light. Let them be so afraid that they dare not think of anything against me. Dare not do it, even don't dare to think about it. Let them respect me. It is better to let them fear me. Episode 107, Summoning the Dark Killer. After Lewis left, Dumbledore looked in silence at the books spread out on the table, and the Merlin illustration on them was a harmonious picture surrounded by birds and animals. It was a long time before he looked up at the portraits of the other principals. Arrogant. Too arrogant. Not just one principal said this, but all principals thought so. Everyone talked about Lewis's terrible remarks, always thinking that this guy was even more exaggerated than Voldemort back then among them. The pure-blooded Phineas Black spoke in the most intense tone. What does he want to do? Do you want to be enemies of all pure-blood families? Even Merlin wouldn't dare to do that. Phineas was so furious that he couldn't wait to jump down and duel with Lewis. What does this have to do with you? You still have a family. How many more people are in the Black family? Dallas Devante, who did not have a good relationship with Phineas, glanced at the other party, and a critical attack made Phineas close himself on the spot. Dumbledore, what do you think? Op 17 is Amendo Dipet, the youngest of the portraits, who knows himself very clearly. He knew that he was a portrait, and their opinions were mostly irrelevant. Only those who thought they were silly and felt that noisy and shouting would be useful. Dumbledore smiled wryly and shook his head. It seems that this Mr. Wilson really gave us a small fright. You think he's a threat? Dallas asked. No, it's not a threat. He's honest and lacks ambition. He's fundamentally different from Tom back then, Dumbledore said. I hope that the follow-up guidance will allow him to maintain this kind of heart. 2 days later, curfew time. Lewis raised his hand to open a door on the wall while his roommates were asleep, and led Asta into the annex room of the Room of Requirement, where he came to the gurgling crucible, grabbed a carbon rod and picked up the magic cloth and looked at it. The magic cloth that was originally dyed purple-black slipped off the moment it was picked up, revealing its true red color. This proves that its properties have been transformed by this pot of liquid, becoming a magic cloth that can carry magic. After 2 days of boiling, the preliminary preparation of the magic cloth has been basically completed. and now it is necessary to add some auxiliary materials to inject magic. After half a month of boiling, the magic cloth is completed. As for what kind of magic Lewis had long thought of, it was the power of the rat charm. There's nothing more amazing than a magic cloth that brings a statue to life. But Lewis places some restrictions on the cloth so that it can't awaken statues that are too powerful. After putting in the auxiliary materials, Lewis looked serious, and the shadow of the rat charm appeared in his eyes. At this time, there are also a large number of cracks on the rat charm phantom, but it is expected that there will be some fire after the complete polishing. The power of dynamic and static conversion flowed into the crucible, and under the guidance of black gas magic, the power did not flow into the crucible, but completely melted into the viscous liquid, and then slowly injected into the magic cloth. This is a long process. During half a month, the power of dynamic and static conversion will transform the structure of the magic cloth all the time, so that it has the power of dynamic and static conversion. After finishing the magic cloth boiling, Lewis led Asta through the wall to an illusory room. This is the main body of the demand-responsive house, and it is also its original form. Everything here seems to be unshaped and changes everywhere. I need a room where potions can be brewed. Lewis's faint voice sounded in this illusory room, and in the blink of an eye, the surrounding illusory became solidified, gradually forming Lewis's familiar potions room. This isn't the first time Lewis has seen changes in the room of demand, but every time he sees Lewis finds it interesting. Okay, continue the ceremony. Lewis rubbed his fists, took out a crucible filled with viscous purple-black liquid from the storage space. This is one of the soup bases that Lewis has boiled in the past 2 days. In order to make it more convenient to study black gas magic in the future, Lewis boiled it when he was fine these 2 days, boiled dozens of pots and put it in the storage space, and took it as he wanted. Anyway, the storage space has no concept of time and will not deteriorate. Add the pre-processed powdered material to the pot. Then Lewis put his hands on the crucible, closed his eyes, and chanted the words in his mouth. With the sound of the incantation, Lewis's hands were wrapped in black gas, and the solution in the pot glowed with purple-black gas, which filled the entire room of demand. Suddenly, Lewis opened his eyes, and there was black energy rolling in his eyes, but he was instantly suppressed by the starlight in his eyes. But that didn't get in the way of the ceremony. Lewis opened his mouth and spat out 3 words. Gone. When? Hi. The black gas in the crucible gushed out, and the momentum was like a volcanic eruption, condensing a constantly rotating purple-black spiral dark cloud on the ceiling of this room. In the middle of the dark clouds, 3 figures slowly emerged, and finally landed in front of Lewis. Gon, Vin, Chui, dark killers in the adventures of a certain dragon, powerful cannon fodder who obeys the orders of the black gas wizard. According to the description in the original book, these 3 primitive states are probably located in the 3rd stage of the cannon fodder group, and they can all cause a lot of trouble to the protagonist, but overall it is like that. 3 dark killers stood in front of Lewis, and when they saw Lewis, they respectfully knelt down on one knee and saluted Lewis. Although it is cannon fodder, it looks good. Lewis touched his chin and looked at the 3 cannon fodder. Judging from the induction of black chi, the strength of these 3 people is not bad. Cutting at least 2 Death Eaters is certainly light 537 Soma pleasure. In addition, they all have immortality. Even if they are killed, they can be reborn from the black chi, which is very qualified cannon fodder. If not, the number is not enough. This can completely replace the Black Shadow Core as the number 1 on the cannon fodder list. But this is not enough. Lewis did not bother to summon these 3 cannon fodder to perform this black gas magic ritual. Leaving a mark on the 3 cannon fodder that could be summoned at any time, Lewis raised his hand to disperse them, and then continued to cast spells on the crucible that was still bubbling with purple-black mist. Only this time, he added a special material in the middle of this. That is the melon with the demonic aura of the water demon. The moment the melon fell into the solution, the terrifying black chi power skyrocketed and almost burst this poor crucible. Lewis's eyes were sharp, and he had already been mentally prepared and immediately used all the black chi suppression in his body, and at the same time, the chicken charm lit up under his eyes, and the double suppression suppressed the churning demon chi. The melon in the solution gradually corroded, and the magic energy power inside gradually awakened and wanted to escape. But under the double suppression of Lewis, there was nowhere to escape, and it could only be helplessly integrated into the solution of the crucible. Even so, the water demon's demonic energy still maintained its independence, but it was gradually saturated with black energy during the fusion process. In the end, the water demon chi completely transformed. Episode 108, Dark Killer, Chuan. With the transformation of the water demonic chi, a large amount of water mist suddenly appeared in the room of demand. The cold mist instantly soaked Lewis's robe, making Asta's hair wet along the way. Meow. Asta howled in dissatisfaction, licked his hair with grievances. The feeling of moisture in the air has increased, but in fact it gives a sense of dryness and contradiction. Lewis sensed his surroundings and found that the water vapor in the air was stripped to form a special elemental state, which had all the properties of water but was detached from the nature of water. These waters have life, deliberately repelling the proximity of other creatures, so that people feel dry when they are drenched. A vortex of black gas appeared above Lewis's head again, only this time, the black gas was mixed with strange water vapor, dyeing the purple-black gas cloud into light purple. In the crucible, the water demon chi slowly rose, and the black chi above the head reflected in harmony. and finally the water vapor, black chi, and demon chi converged and turned into a tall human shape. This is a woman, and her appearance is completely different from the dark killer. Her skin is seductively lilac, she has a snake-like enchanting face, her figure is hot, the proud upper circumference wrapped in leather bandeau sets off her waist, and the waistcoat line on her abdomen is clearly visible. In addition to the strange appearance of her skin, her body also has light blue tattoo-like lines, and each hair is like a thick snake swimming behind her head, looking very much like some legendary creature. Naga. As soon as the special dark killer appeared, he knelt down towards Lewis and said respectfully, "See the master, you can talk?" Lewis was a little surprised. This is different from the 3 cannon fodder of Ganwen Choi. "Yes, master, the demonic energy has given me higher wisdom so that I can better understand the will of the master." This female dark killer shows her own specialness, not only can speak, but also does not have mechanical conversations, but also has her own thinking and understanding. "Sounds good," Lewis asked, looking at the beauty in front of him. "What are you capable of?" "Like my compatriots, I have a dark weapon derived from black chi." The female dark killer raised her hand, and a black chi appeared out of thin air and turned into a slender leather whip. The whip revolved around her like a living creature, and the metal dagger at the end appeared like the fangs of a viper. She skillfully manipulated the long whip to obediently swim around her. After performing the long whip, she raised her hand and raised a water ball and said, "I also use the power of the water demon chi." The water ball turned into a knife and a club. The 18th class of weapons came to rotate, and then the whole body turned into water, turning into a variety of people with different appearances. Limited by the venue, she did not show more abilities, such as setting off huge waves, forming whirlpools, and so on. Interesting. Lewis is very satisfied with the ability of this dark killer, even if he absorbs the demonic energy of the water demon. "I am afraid that it is not as good as her." The dark slayer ended the demonstration and stood quietly in front of Lewis, looking down at Lewis, waiting for his orders. "Do you have a name?" Lewis asked. "No, I am a dark killer created by you, and I don't have my own name yet." The female dark killer said. Lewis thought about it. "In that case, then you call Chuan." "Thank you, master, for the name." Chuan again got down on one knee to pay his respects to Lewis. "Get up, I'll give you a task, and in the future, you will be responsible for letting Ganwen Choi keep an eye on Quirrell." Lewis began to arrange work for Chuan, and finally had a subordinate with brains who had to practice. When explaining the task, he taught Chuan a little about Voldemort and Quirrell. By the way, Chuan listened very carefully, and when Lewis finished speaking, she questioned, "Master, this Voldemort seems to be very perceptive, and although Ganwen Choi is also a battle-hardened warrior, their ability to stealth is not outstanding and is easy to detect." "Yes, I deliberately let them be detected." Lewis was pleased with the newbie's reaction. "It doesn't matter if they are discovered, if they make further moves, you come forward as the examiner of villains from all over the world united to become a family." What family?" Chuan was stunned for a moment, and a blank expression appeared on the seductive face, looking a little dumbfounded. "It's villains all over the world unite to become one family." Lewis patiently taught again. "I really can't remember just saying that you are an examiner. No matter what the other person asks, you will say to him with an indifferent expression, 'It's not something you should know. It's not something you should know.'" Chuan tried it with an indifferent expression. "That's right, that's it." Lewis clapped his hands. "The acting is good, plus, remember to ask the guy to give you the prepared things and put them in the attached room next to it." "Yes, master." Lewis is patching. The villains of the world united to become a family. This organization as a powerful existence that he fabricated is actually not a small soldier under his hands until now, which is obviously abnormal. You can have only one senior level in an organization, but you can't let the boss do all the small things, right? That's too unpressed. Voldemort had a few platoons of Death Eaters. That's why Lewis thought about summoning the Dark Killer. In fact, Lewis's first target is the Dark Shadow Core, that is, the power of the Terra Mask, but his current level of black energy is simply not enough to control the power in the mask. He didn't want to take a mask and become Terra. If he was a substitute, wearing a mask in case something goes wrong is also tricky. The first choice is finished, then you can only choose an alternative. Fortunately, there is Chuan as the scheduling. Otherwise Lewis is still a little uneasy about controlling Ganwen Choi. He was worried that the brainless Dark Slayer would chop Quirrell if he didn't pay attention. And in Voldemort's current state, the Dark Slayer killed Quirrell just like playing. And by the way, he could also rub Voldemort on the ground. By the way, do you have any needs for your weapons? Lewis asked suddenly. Chuan was stunned for a moment and said, "Back to the master, our weapons are companion, driven like arms, and do not need other weapons." "I know you have companion weapons, but that's not enough." Lewis snapped his fingers, and a golden ripple appeared in front of Chuan, and a golden string-long whip emerged from it. The name given to this whip system is Gleipnir, a legendary whip made from things that do not exist in the world. From the king's treasury, it is naturally the so-called prototype, but the prototype is not stronger than the legendary things, because the legendary things have mythical blessings, and the prototype only has materials and a little mythical ability. "Take it, this is the weapon I gave you. It should be able to trap any existence in this world." Lewis said, "Thank the master for the reward." There was a little joy in Chuan's eyes, and she took the divine whip and let it wrap around her arm. The combination of gold and lilac skin adds a bit of radiance to her. Okay, you go down, Lewis ordered. I authorize you to order Gonwinsue to complete the task I gave you. Yes, master. Chuan nodded, turned around and turned into a puddle of water and disappeared into the house of demand. The room of requirement, which can isolate the inside and outside, cannot stop the dark ability of the dark killer, and even here she can leave or appear through the darkness at any time. Just like now, although Gonwentrell has theoretically run to spy on Voldemort and Quirrell, he can summon his loyal men back at any time if Lewis wants to. Worthy of a convenient cannon fodder machine. Episode 109, Who Ordered the Takeaway? Hogwarts late at night is somewhat gloomy. Because of the structure of the castle, the pure moonlight can only light up a small place, and more places are shrouded in darkness, not to mention the windowless corridors inside the castle. In the middle of the night, the candle flame went out, and there were no fingers there. This is a challenge for night tour students, but it is also a good environment for some bad things for people with ghost babies. At the corner of the corridor and the wall, a big black rat with a tail and a small arm's length ran quickly with a map in his mouth, like a mouse found stealing oil. Well, he is the mouse. The big rat with the map in his mouth is naturally Peter Pettigrew, and since he was pointed out by the Slytherin student and intimidated by his eyes, he has been a little sleepy. That's right, he can't sleep again, not to mention the weird beans this time. He doesn't even want to eat. Who made him timid? If he hadn't been timid, he wouldn't have become Voldemort's guilty, and he wouldn't have revealed the location of the Potters protected by the curse of honesty to Voldemort as a confidential person. Timidity is natural, but the malice hidden under timidity is no less than boldness. That little devil. It's abominable. Peter Pettigrew felt angry and ashamed of 773 when he thought of that Slytherin student. It was a shame not to think that I would be frightened by a minor wizard. Peter Pettigrew dared to force 2 words at this time, and he didn't even dare to recall the way the Slytherin student stared at him, and could only dispel his fear with vicious thoughts. Kill him. Kill him. Kill him. The mouse's eyes flashed viciously, and he stared irritably at the name on the map, searching everywhere without finding the Slytherin student's name. Where did he go? Where did that guy named Lewis Wilson run to? Peter Pettigrew hated itching teeth, and he couldn't wait to tear this person apart one bite at a time. Suddenly, a name flashed in the location of the Slytherin dormitory on the Marauder's map, and Lewis Wilson appeared in the Slytherin dormitory. Finally out? Peter Pettigrew didn't know why the student's name suddenly disappeared, and he didn't care. At this time he only thought about killing this person who might expose him. He was genuinely vindictive, and it was clear that the Weasley's twins were trying to find him, but he just stole the map and faced Lewis with the idea of killing him. Not because he had a crush on Weasley, who had lived together for 5 years, but because he felt fear in Lewis that the twins didn't give him that feeling. Sensitive, cowardly, and ruthless little people will always unknowingly expose his disgusting and fierce fangs, but when he came to the door of the Slytherin common room, Peter Pettigrew was stunned. Because he didn't know the password, he couldn't get in. Even if he knew the password, it was useless, and he could not restore it in front of the portrait, which would expose the truth that he was not dead. He knew the portraits, they were all Dumbledore's eyeliner, and being exposed to them was no different than being exposed to Dumbledore. Just as Peter Pettigrew was squeaking anxiously, a Slytherin student who had just sneaked back from a night tour gave Peter Pettigrew hope. Lion's Mane. The Slytherin student pronounced the correct password, the door opened, and Peter Pettigrew saw this and immediately followed suit. Here's your chance. Peter Pettigrew was trembling with excitement. He could kill that annoying Wilson today. In the dormitory, Lewis, who had just finished washing, yawned, changed into pajamas and lay down on the bed. The tall elderberry wand was casually placed by him at the head of the bed, and he stretched to sleep. After 2 black gas ceremonies, Lewis was also a little sleepy, plus the time was in the middle of the night. If it were not for the horse charm and the dog charm, Lewis was worried about his sudden death. Good night, Asta. Good night, Fafnir. Lewis greeted his 2 pets and fell asleep on the soft pillow. In the dream, he was particularly awake and idle and bored because of the power of the dream demon, and Lewis simply pinched out a few passers-by and played mahjong with himself. Playing mahjong in a dream, it was really a ghost when I saw King Yen in the middle of the day, and when Lewis as a dream demon did not control his subconscious divergent thinking. The plot of the dream was also bizarre. Lewis pushed his cards with a serious face, and the word was a single hanging king. Huh. Where is the king of this special mahjong card? But those who play cards think it is very reasonable. Lewis didn't even figure it out after 4 or 5 laps. But just like that, there is a hammer rule in the dream. If it doesn't happen that you make 3 and I make 4 2 cakes to fry you, you steal the fun. Just when Lewis was playing confused mahjong in his dream, the door of the dormitory opened silently. A mouse with red eyes sneakily came in. This immediately caught the attention of the 2 overlords in the dormitory. The owl Fafnir, the meta-eater Asta, almost at the same time turned to look at the mouse outside the door. Hey! Late night snack is here. Who ordered takeaway? Peter Pettigrew outside the door did not realize the seriousness of the matter. He listened to the sound of even breathing in the dormitory, thinking that he had sneaked in unknowingly. Now just take that Slytherin student's wand, kill him, and dump his body into the Black Lake. Peter Pettigrew quietly approached where the name Wilson Lewis was located, and at a glance saw the wand placed at the end of the bed. He was snickering, and was about to step forward when he suddenly felt a chill, as if two pairs of fierce eyes were staring at him. Who? The rat on the ground spun in circles like a pumping wind, completely oblivious to the cat and owl staring at him with interest above his head. Meow, Asta whispered to Fafnir, meaning you or me. Gollum, Fafnir replied in an equally quiet voice, meaning wait first. This mouse looks like it is sick. I don't know if there is a parasite or heat stroke. Wait and see. Meow? Asta glanced at Fafnir and felt that the owl had a problem with his brain. What can this rat do? Just catch it directly. Just thinking like this, suddenly the mouse actually expanded at a speed visible to the naked eye. Meow. The cat was shocked. Asta couldn't understand, and said to Fafnir, look at that thing, suddenly became able to eat many meals. Of course, we should treat food simply, rather than swallowing them into the stomach and throwing them into a parallel universe. Goof. Fafnir flapped his wings and pointed to the rat man who held his hand to his wand, meaning, don't hesitate, go up and him. Meow. Gollum. A cat and an owl screamed and pounced on Peter Pettigrew. Episode 110, it's quite miserable. The moment Peter Pettigrew got his wand, he was excited. 10 years, he hasn't touched a wand in 10 years. Who knows how he spent this decade? In order to get rid of his suspicion, Peter Pettigrew devised a trick to get Sirius Black, the only known to be a secret, to block him in the streets of Muggles. Sirius Black, who had been his closest friend, hated himself for how close he had been in the past because he betrayed their mutual friends Potters as a confidential man. Voldemort came to the door and killed them. Sirius Black, who was supposed to be a secretive, hated himself immensely, but hated Peter Pettigrew even more. But the other party did not expect how cruel Peter Pettigrew, who had always been cowardly, was. He cut off his little finger and in turn unleashed a powerful explosive spell that killed almost all Muggles on the entire street, while he himself took the opportunity to escape. That time he lost his wand and a finger, became a rat living in the sewers, and then by chance entered the Weasleys to become their pet. Peter Pettigrew never changed back into a human all these years, because he was afraid of others liquidating himself, because by that time Voldemort was already dead, at the hands of a newborn Harry Potter baby. Ha ha ha, I knew it was fake news. How could the Dark Lord die? Peter Pettigrew smiled darkly and looked at the map in his hand. Look, the Dark Lord is still there, he's alive. Tom Riddle, that name he will never forget in his life. I just don't know why the Dark Lord's name is tied to a man named Quirinus Quirrell. That's right, the reason why Peter, the intermittent and vicious man, rushed to kill Lewis in such a mood was because he saw the name of his master and he had courage again. With the wand in hand, Peter Pettigrew looked at Lewis, who was extremely focused on playing outrageous mahjong in his dreams, with a wicked smile on his face. Avada Naz the Great Witch. Peter Pettigrew, with resolute killing intent, chanted a vicious spell in a small voice, waving his wand at Lewis, and then nothing happened. What? Peter Pettigrew was confused. He never dreamed that the wand in Lewis's hand would be a fake without a wand core. He looked up at the wand in his hand, only to see a huge owl pounced on his face. Sting. Ah, one. The sharp eagle claw slashed through Peter Pettigrew's left eye, leaving a deep bony wound, and one eyeball rolled from the torn eye socket and hung out of the eye socket. Don't look at Fafnir's usual cute in front of Lewis. Owls are birds of prey, not to mention that Fafnir is an eagle owl, the largest owl, plus the strengthening of 3 genetic potions. Its claws are strong enough to crush rocks. Peter Pettigrew was lucky enough to be the first wizard to experience the power of Fafnir. The severe pain made Peter Pettigrew scream subconsciously, and the sharp and piercing sound immediately woke up everyone in the dormitory. Lewis, who touched a flesh and hung 110,000 in his dream, immediately walked out of the dream and woke up. As soon as he opened his eyes, Lewis saw a dead fat man with a face covered in blood, ragged clothes, and incomprehensible appearance, but with a lewd temperament, screaming at his bedside. Lewis, who was playing mahjong properly, opened his eyes widened, and a bull charm immediately appeared in his eyes, and then subconsciously kicked out. Boom! With an even more exaggerated loud noise, Peter Pettigrew wiped his sleepy eyes, and Malfoy, who opened his eyes blankly, smashed into the wall, his fat body thinned half an inch out of thin air, and a hole was opened in his stomach. Malfoy turned his head blankly and saw Peter Pettigrew, who was trapped in the wall, with blood spurting from his mouth, one eye hanging over his face, and Peter Pettigrew rolled his eyes and fainted. Also woken up were fellow dormitories Goyle, Crabbe, and the black brother Bress Sabini, but before they could see what was happening, they were dragged into a dream by a snap of Lewis's fingers. What suddenly came running in front of me? Lewis's face was very smelly, and anyone who was awakened suddenly found that there was a dead fat man in front of him holding a face with a missing eye and screaming there. And the consequences of Lewis's unhappiness are very direct. He directly kicked the guy who made him unhappy into the wall. Lewis walked to the wall and frowned at Peter Pettigrew, who was full of fear and his body trembled and would burp at any moment. Who is this guy? Ask for flowers. Peter Pettigrew blackened before his eyes, and the remaining consciousness was overwhelmed by fear. This guy in front of you is not human. It's not human. Peter Pettigrew roared inwardly with all his strength, just kicking him to death. How could there be such a human? This must be a monster in human skin. At this time Asta, who did not attack Peter Pettigrew because he disliked donating blood, ran over from the side, holding a thick map in his mouth and handing it to Lewis. When Lewis saw it, it was actually an activated Marauder's map. Oh, so it's Peter Pettigrew. Lewis looked at it carefully, and the dead fat man in front of him, who was about to change from a dead fat man, described, to a dead fat man, realistic, showed a smile. Peter Pettigrew, do you want to live? What? Peter Pettigrew, who was already dying, could no longer understand what Lewis was saying, and he felt that his body was so light, as if he was about to float. Then in his field of vision, which was covered by a large black spot, he saw the monster in front of him stretch out his hand and place it on his body, and then a dragging force hit, making his consciousness that was about to float away fall into the flesh. The severe pain came instantly, causing Peter Pettigrew to tilt his head and faint. What a waste, I can't bear this pain. Lewis, who was repairing Peter's body with a horse charm, shook his head, disgusted by the bald fat man in front of him. Not only did he think he was fat, but he was also dirty. Not to mention the clothes, the scorched yellow nail so long actually dared to touch his wand, and the truth killed him in a fit of anger. He saved this man not because he had compassion, but because he didn't get destiny points by killing Peter Pettigrew directly. The focus of obtaining destiny points is to fool fate, and individuals who destroy fate manipulation cannot obtain destiny points, and every plot character is the person with the clearest fate in Lewis's eyes, and he feels a loss to lose a Lewis unless it has been squeezed dry. Like Peter Pettigrew, who has a key character in several Harry Potter plots hanging on his body, Lewis can't kill him. Episode 111, Dealing with Peter Pettigrew, add more and more. Ask for a reward to urge a change ticket. Lewis dragged Peter Pettigrew unconscious to the room of requirement. The surrounding environment changed rapidly and became a potions room, and Lewis took out a crucible filled with soup base and began to dispense potions. A potion used to clear memories, Oblivion Potion. This potion is recorded in Advanced Potion, and Lewis casually changed some subtleties to make it more controllable. Lewis wants to delete Peter's abnormal memory of Peter Pettigrew, that is, the memory of almost being suffocated by Lewis. The memory of dying must be particularly deep, and in order to make him forget it, Lewis specially increased the dosage. The reason why Peter Pettigrew also specially deleted his memory is mainly because Peter Pettigrew can lead to the plot of Sirius Black. Sirius Black, an important figure, carries no less than a few hundred destiny points on his back. To Lewis, wouldn't such an experience be a loss if Lewis died in Azkaban because Peter Pettigrew was gone? Lewis couldn't find where Azkaban was. It was harder to find than the beacon where Uncle Harry took him to hide from school letters. Sirius Black died in Azkaban. Such an indirect fate tamper. Lewis could not receive the fate point reward. If only then Lewis would vomit. Be honest, be safe. When the time comes, obediently lure Sirius Black out, and I'll arrange you again. Lewis muttered as he manipulated a ball of scalding potion into Peter Pettigrew with the power of the chicken charm. The arrangement of Peter Pettigrew protrudes with one word: God unfolds. The so-called God unfolding is a development in which the brain hole is so big that a pit in the neck cannot be imagined. Well, I should be able to get this diary next year. I will have 2 Voldemort demons in my hand by then, and by the 3rd year, choose one for Peter Pettigrew to hold. It just so happens that Lewis also has a Voldemort Smash Brothers task. Find several people to share one Voldemort each, and then let them pinch each other. This degree of fate distortion is afraid that it can directly play fate bad. After filling the potion and deleting the memory, Lewis dragged Peter Pettigrew to find a corner that would hardly be found by people or portrait ghosts and left it there. After thinking for a while, Lewis spoke. Chuan. As soon as the words fell, there were water traces seeping out of the floor and forming into a beautiful young lady. Master, Chuan responded. Look at this person. Don't let others find him. You can leave when he is about to wake up. Lewis said. Yes, Master. Chuan nodded. By the way, did Voldemort find you? Lewis asked casually. Chuan shook his head. Back to the Master. Not yet. Maybe it's too short. Lewis nodded. Continue to monitor Voldemort's mission after guarding here. Yes. The young lady turned into a puddle of water and dived underground, seemingly leaving, but Lewis knew that this was a special surveillance method for Chuan, and if someone came here, she could instantly drag Peter Pettigrew into the dark world. After checking his belongings before leaving, Lewis opened the door to the room attached to the room of demand, and opened the door from the room back to the dormitory. To have authority is to be able to do whatever you want. The long-lost daily life came like this. Lewis yawned and leaned on his arm to watch the professor drowsily as he lectured. This lesson is history of magic, and the professor who teaches it is a ghost named Binskis Burt, a man almost as old as Hogwarts. Well, it's the total age before and after death. The only match for his age in school is Peeves. That's right, the mischievous Peeves is outrageously old. He has existed almost since Hogwarts officially had students, and almost every year people try to chase him away, but they don't succeed. Let's talk about this Professor Cuthbert. This professor is erudite, and the lecture is not bad, but the lecture comes with hypnosis, and most of the people will fall asleep after a class. Lewis's dream demon bloodline is a little unbearable. For example, Harry Potter and his little heel Ron and his rat Scabber sitting next to Lewis slept soundly. Fortunately, Professor Cuthbert doesn't care about students sleeping, and he knows that his lectures are like hypnosis, so in his class, sleep is okay, as long as it doesn't disturb others. I don't remember when Harry Potter liked to sit next to him, ask when he had questions, discuss without problems, and like to bring Lewis. Reaching out and not hitting the smiley face, although Harry's behavior is a little annoying, but Lewis is not good to refuse. However, his behavior of not refusing seems to make Harry believe that the two are friends, and people have to sigh how eager Harry, who has lacked friends since childhood, is eager to make friends. After the history of magic class, Lewis packed up his textbooks and planned to leave, and the bleary-eyed Harry and Ron next to him stretched and stood up. Ron's rat spot almost fell off Ron, and quickly hooked Ron's robe so that it didn't fall to the ground. "Oh, Scabbard, you've been so stupid lately." Ron glanced at the busy mouse and shook his head helplessly. "You could have wrapped your tail around my hand before." Lewis glanced at the mouse, and said in his heart that it was understandable. After all, the powerful forgetting potion configured by the black gas magic made it normal for the user to forget a little instinctive action. It's finally the end of class. The history of magic course is really exhausting. Ron asked, pinching his sleeping numb arm. "What are we going to do?" "Let's play wizard chess." Harry was eager to try, and ever since he learned wizard chess, he had been fascinated by the moving pieces. "Lewis, are you coming?" Harry asked. "No, Hermione and I made an appointment to go to the library." Lewis refused. This savior fooled him every day to play wizard chess and did not learn well. "You've turned down Harry's 5 invitations. Why don't you always go to the library with that nerd? Oh my god. No one really reads for fun." 59. Ron grumbled. Lewis said with a subtle expression and patted Ron's shoulder. "Bear with me. 3, 2. Ron looked inexplicable, watching Lewis count to 1, and suddenly a book slapped him on the back of his head. "I can't stop you as a nerd who likes to read for fun," Hermione said with wide eyes. Harry on the side snickered and greeted Hermione. "Good afternoon, Hermione." "Good afternoon, Harry." Hermione nodded and turned to continue glaring at Ron. Ron said badly about people behind his back and was caught knowing that he was unreasonable. "I'm sorry." He still looked at Lewis with resentment when he said he was sorry. Lewis spread his hands. "Don't blame me for reminding late. It's just such a coincidence. You just said that she came." Episode 112, Christmas Holiday. Add more. Ask for support and encouragement. "Let's go, Lewis. Don't talk to him." Hermione looked at Ron and rolled her eyes and turned to ask Harry. "Is Harry going to the library together?" "Don't let yourself fall with this guy who has no luck." Harry smiled awkwardly. "Sorry, Hermione, I still want to play wizard chess." "Okay." Hermione shook her head with an expression of hatred that was not steel, and took Lewis's arm to leave. "Don't fall for yourself with this guy who has no luck." Ron said this in a funny imitation of Hermione's tone, and Harry was almost amused, and was about to laugh when he suddenly withdrew his smile. "Ron has no gap and is still spitting. You listen, what she said. It is estimated that only Lewis can stand her." Before the words fell, Ron felt a sharp pain in his feet. It was Hermione. She actually jumped up and stepped on his feet. "Humph." Hermione watched Ron, who was jumping on his feet, dashingly turn his head away and run to Lewis's side. "Am I doing this well?" Hermione said cheerfully beside Lewis. "Yes, if there is dissatisfaction, express it directly, so that the other party correctly realizes that he is wrong." Lewis patted Hermione on the head. "Nice job." The two went to the library together and sat down near the fireplace. As winter gets cooler, the fireplace in the castle is always gas-filled, providing students with 17 warm hours. Hermione sat down and took out the book she hadn't finished reading last time and continued to read, and she habitually glanced up at Lewis between readings, and then continued to read with a slight smile. "By the way, Lewis, are you going to stay at school or go home during the Christmas holidays?" Hermione asked. "Going home, of course," Lewis replied. "What about you?" "I'll go back too, so we can be together on the way." Hermione was pleased. The Christmas holiday lasts 7 days, starting on December 18th and continuing until December 25th. With a Christmas dinner in the evening. Lewis was definitely going home. He hadn't seen him for half a year, and Mrs. Wilson was going crazy thinking about her son. But a lot happens during Christmas. The first is that the invisibility cloak, one of the Deathly Hallows, will return to the Potter family. That is, Harry Potter. The artifact was kept by Dumbledore until Christmas when it was returned to Harry Potter. The second is the Mirror of Eris, which appears in the basement and is discovered by Harry, who wanders at night, and is addicted to it. The Eris magic mirror can illuminate the things that people desire most, and it is naturally easy to make people addicted. Dumbledore used the characteristics of the magic mirror to create a level to protect the Philosopher's Stone from falling into Voldemort's hands. Dumbledore would break Harry's illusions after he was addicted and place the magic mirror in the level where the Philosopher's Stone would be placed. That's right, Lewis wants to get the Philosopher's Stone. Although Lewis is immortal and has an endless treasure trove such as the King's treasure, he is still curious about the Philosopher's Stone turning stones into gold. Isn't this thing more interesting than a treasure trove full of gold? So Lewis plans to break through the level, and then get the Philosopher's Stone and blame Voldemort. Taking the Philosopher's Stone is simple. The difficult thing is to blame Voldemort. So this requires a little special approach. There should be no problem. Quirrell will soon be unable to hold on. Find a way to provoke his betrayal and make him tell everyone that Voldemort took the Philosopher's Stone. And then again, Lewis? Lewis? Just as Lewis was lost in thought, Hermione woke him up. "What are you thinking?" I'm thinking about a magic trick, Lewis said with a smile. A fish I mixed beads, the magic of mixing water to touch fish. February 18th, sunny. The weather was nice today, perfect for going home. Lewis put on his winter coat, put on his robes, packed his bags, and prepared to leave the dormitory. Have a good place at school during the holidays, don't go to the Forbidden Forest, you know? Before leaving, Lewis sounded the alarm for the two cats, Orange Cat and Owl. Meow, goo. Both Fafnir and Asta said they would obey. Lewis nodded with satisfaction, dropped his luggage and walked out of the dormitory. Don't worry about luggage. There will be house elves delivered to the station, and he has something to do before leaving. In the annex room of the Room of Demand, Lewis summoned Kawu. Master, this is the material that Voldemort collected for you. As soon as Chuan appeared, he offered a large package. Well, just put it here. Lewis nodded. Chuan was discovered by Voldemort, or did you show up on your own initiative? Back to the master, I took the initiative to appear. They didn't even find Gonwen Sue. Chuan said. Voldemort didn't seem to be in a good state and didn't dare to wake up casually, and I had a brief communication with Voldemort when he appeared, during which time his carrier Quirrell's body showed signs of collapse. It seems that Quirrell will not be able to hold on to the Forbidden Forest. Lewis nodded. Your mission continues, but replace Gonwen Sue. You go personally. Remember to leave me some unicorn materials by the way, especially the tail hair. Yes, master. Well, that's it, you go down, Lewis said. After hearing this, Chuan turned into a stream of water and disappeared, while Lewis released his stand-in. The faceless ghost floated quietly in the room. Just put it here, you can use it at any time when the time comes. Lewis looked at the stand-in, and then deliberately patted him on the shoulder as if to exchange pleasantries with his subordinates. That's up to you, no problem. The stand-in's mouth spat out Lewis's voice. It's fun to ask and answer yourself. Lewis smiled, turned and opened the door to leave. Everything is ready, you can go home. That's how the Christmas holidays arrived. On the train home, Hermione and Lewis sat in the same box. Because many students did not go home, the carriage was very empty, and the two were able to enjoy the world of two. There was laughter and laughter along the way. Around noon, the train entered platform 9 3/4, and Lewis and Hermione got off together, with Lewis helping with the luggage. Look, is that your father? Lewis bumped Hermione with his shoulder and signaled her to look ahead. Hermione looked in the direction Lewis had said, and sure enough, she saw Mr. Granger. Dad. After not seeing her for half a year, Hermione waved happily at her parents. Mr. Granger looked at this side with a strange expression. Welcome home, Hermione. Mr. Granger gave his daughter a hug and then looked at Lewis. See you again, Mr. Granger. Good afternoon. Lewis was calm. He took off his top hat and said hello. Good afternoon. I remember you are Wilson. Yes, you are the grandson of Mr. Wilson Sr. 580. Mr. Granger first thought back to Lewis, then looked meaningfully at his daughter and Lewis. Hermione didn't think much and said goodbye to Lewis. Lewis, see you after the holidays. See you after the holidays. Lewis handed Hermione's luggage to Mr. Granger and watched the Granger family leave. Then a person suddenly appeared behind Lewis. Is that your girlfriend? Lewis. It was Lambert Wilson, the magician who didn't know when he came behind Lewis, and if it weren't for Lewis's mental sensitivity, he wouldn't even be able to find out. Lewis shook his head a little helplessly and looked at Mr. Wilson. Not yet. Then you have to come on. Dad has started dating when he's your age. Mr. Wilson looked encouraging. I remember you and your mother first met when they were 20, Lewis said slowly. I think Mom, she must be interested in your first date. Ahem, it's not early, it's time to go home. Your mother thinks you are crazy. Mr. Wilson coughed twice. Let's go home. Mr. Wilson was carrying Lewis's luggage, looking at Lewis as he walked, and suddenly he said, So, son, do you remember what Dad just said? That's what your father and I said. Oh, your mother and I are the first love, and the front doesn't count. Oh, I just bragged about it. I was still playing in the mud when I was your age. Oh, episode 113, but he is a descendant of Merlin. The Christmas holidays, purebloods don't ignore either. Draco Malfoy stepped off the train and breathed in the icy air, feeling like a world away. It had only been a few months since he left home for Hogwarts, but he had the illusion that he had been languishing in hell for several years, and he couldn't help but burst into tears at the thought of this. Draco, an indifferent voice sounded. An elegant man with long hair and a white gold shawl walked over, and the momentum of his body made Draco involuntarily awe and adoration. Father. Draco suppressed the joy in his heart and greeted him politely. Father said, Be elegant. Death Eater, the current ruler of the Malfoy family, Lucius Malfoy nodded reservedly. Give Dobby the luggage, let's go home. Yes, father. Draco casually threw his suitcase to a house elf who was about a meter tall. He trembled and caught the suitcase that was too large for him, and almost didn't get overturned. No one cared what happened to the house elf. He could only grit his teeth and carry his luggage, snap his fingers and disappear in place. However, there is no counter-apparition transfer spell in the manor like Hogwarts, and that kind of magic must be done by more than 10 wizards who are proficient in magic, and the Malfoys do not have this condition. As for why they didn't arrive at the manor by car and instead with flue powder and fireplaces, It was naturally because the noble wizards refused to associate themselves with muggles, and it was an insult to let them pass by those muggles in the station. Even waiting for children at a station with the parents of those muggle wizards was a shame on Lucius Malfoy. Phantom transition is not used because Draco Malfoy is not trained, and it is not elegant enough to feel that phantom transition may vomit. The gate of the manor slowly opened. Dobby, who had just finished packing his luggage, hurriedly ran out to greet the two, and after entering the palatial manor castle, Dobby panicked to prepare lunch. Draco! An excited female voice shouted, and Draco's mother, Narcissa Malfoy, hurried out to greet her precious son. Mom. Seeing his mother, Draco was visibly much more relaxed, and the gentle mother was more caring than his serious father. Stop standing there, come over for lunch. Narcissa took Draco with one hand and Lucius into the dining room with the other. The table was filled with a sumptuous lunch prepared by Dobby, and the table was quiet except for the sound of knives and forks clashing with plates. The silence lasted until the end of lunch, and only when Dobby removed his plates and cleaned the table did Lucius Malfoy speak. Did anything interesting happen at school? Although this topic was a daily chat, it seemed to be interrogated in Lucius's depressed tone. Draco Malfoy had long been accustomed to his father's way of speaking, and was about to share some of his experiences at school, but as soon as he opened his mouth, he lowered his head in shame. What do you do with your head down? Keep your head up, Lucius Malfoy said solemnly. Draco Malfoy looked up helplessly and looked at his serious father and gentle mother and said, there is nothing interesting in school. No? Lucius Malfoy looked at his son. I heard that Harry Potter is also enrolled this year? Yes. Then you didn't communicate with him? Lucius asked. No, he mingled with the Weasley's youngest son and spoke harshly to me. Speaking of this, Draco was extremely disgruntled. How Weasley? At the mention of this surname, Lucius Malfoy's eyes showed disgust and disgust. To give pure-blooded families to the dark, to mix with them is to be self-resigned and degenerate. Lucius Malfoy said this because of his resentment. Usually he laughed at Weasley at most, but now he added disgust at the recent discordant rumors in the Ministry of Magic, saying that someone was actively promoting the ban on dark magic items, and even searching pure-blood families. And Arthur Weasley, the red-haired father, was actively promoting this law. Sooner or later, we have to teach them a lesson. Lucius Malfoy thought to himself, but who doesn't have one or two dark magic items in a pure-blood family with a long history? Not to mention that Lucius Malfoy was once a Death Eater and a leader-level Death Eater trusted by Voldemort. If he hadn't claimed to be controlled by the Imperius Curse and donated a sum of money to eliminate the disaster, he would probably only be able to accompany the Dementors in Azkaban now. So he has countless dark magic items in his house, not to mention that he has more dangerous things than dark magic items. Every time he thought of that thing, Lucius shuddered. Harry Potter, that boy who never died, must have become a figure in Hogwarts, right? Just like his father. Annoying, Lucius said firmly. And not, Draco Malfoy said. The biggest limelight in the school right now is Lewis Wilson. Lewis Wilson? Lucius frowned. Haven't heard of this surname. It should not be pure blood. Is he Gryffindor or Ravenclaw? Lucius naturally ignored Hufflepuff, and as a pure Slytherin, he had always looked down on Hufflepuff. Neither, he's a Slytherin. Draco Malfoy hesitated. He wanted to sue. He wanted to use his father's power to deal with Lewis, but he was a little scared. Slytherin? Is he a half-blood wizard? Lucius asked. No, we all thought he was a Muggle wizard at first. Draco was just about to explain when he heard his father's growl. What? Muggle wizard, how dare Dumbledore? He's defiling Hogwarts and Slytherin. Draco's body shook, and he had never seen his father so grumpy before. He almost peed in fright. No, not the father, Draco quickly explained. Later we learned that he was not a Muggle wizard, but a descendant of a squib. Squib? So what's the difference? Lucius snorted coldly. This is depravity. I'm contacting other school trustees to impeach Dumbledore, but that squib is said to come from Merlin's bloodline. Draco Malfoy whispered. What bloodline? What did you say? Lucius' eyes widened, thinking he had misheard. Merlin bloodline, Draco said again. That Lewis Wilson is a Merlin bloodline wizard. The lavish restaurant fell into a dead silence. Merlin blood? Narcissa Malfoy came in disbelief. It's ridiculous. Can you be sure? Draco? Lucius asked after a moment of silence. Draco scratched his head. Everyone says so. And what? Lucius asked. And he can manipulate dreams, and I was killed by him for a long time, Draco said aggrievedly. Manipulating dreams. Lucius' eyes widened in his heart to determine the authenticity of this Merlin bloodline. At the same time, many pure-blood families learned about the so-called Merlin bloodline from their children, and even Goyle and Crabbe, two brain-underdeveloped people, would tell their parents about it. For a time, almost all pure-blood families were shocked by this news. It was like a boulder smashed into a calm pond and stirring up ripples on the water. I just don't know how these people will react to Lewis's existence. Episode 114, Make Trouble. Make trouble. At night, Lewis wanders around Hogwarts Castle like a ghost of an ancient castle. Obviously just after 8 o'clock, Hogwarts is eerie and scary, coupled with those ghosts that wander from time to time. No big heart wants to live well here. I enjoyed a more relaxing time at home today, and I am still enjoying it at this time. Lewis was still chatting with his parents by the fireplace at home, chatting about some interesting facts about the School of Magic, and he was just dividing part of his energy to control the Faceless Phantom wandering. The Faceless Phantom, as a stand-in for Range A, really lived up to the expectations of Lewis alone, and could still operate here when Lewis was away from Hogwarts. Lewis was thinking about one thing at this time, and that was whether Harry would come out for a night tour on Christmas night, because he didn't know if Hagrid, who was tight-lipped about the jar, had inadvertently revealed the name Nicolaim. He also didn't know if Hermione, who had long been inseparable trio, had ever mentioned Nicolaim's relationship with the Philosopher's Stone to Harry. So he didn't know if Harry would wear an invisibility cloak at night to go to the Forbidden Book area and find the Eris magic mirror in a panic, but it doesn't matter. Whether Harry finds the mirror of Eris or not, it will appear when it should appear, and it will not be taken away until later. Lewis was curious about the magic mirror, but not about Harry. He wanted to see what the Eris mirror would reflect when it hits him. It is said that truly happy people see themselves in the mirror. Lewis wondered if he was happy enough. It wasn't hard to find the magic mirror, or Dumbledore didn't bother to hide it at all. Lewis found the magic mirror in a room. This magic mirror is at least 3 meters high, and the mirror surface is cloudy and yellowish, making it impossible to shine a figure from 2 meters away. The Faceless Phantom stood in front of the mirror, and as a spiritual body, he could not be seen, so there was nothing on the mirror. Lewis tried again to make the avatar a physical one, but there was still no image on the mirror. Do you need an ontology? Lewis thought about it and planned to come back late at night. You can't always chat at home about half of the substitution, right? Late at night, both parents were asleep, and Lewis swapped places with the stand-in in his room. In his bed, the Faceless Phantom slowly transformed into Lewis's appearance disguised as a mature sleeper, and the real Lewis has returned to Hogwarts in his place as a substitute. However, he did not meet Harry in the Cloak of Invisibility, because according to the time, Harry's Cloak of Invisibility will not be received until the day of the Holy Festival. Seeing the mirror of Eris again, Lewis lifted his invisibility and stood in front of the mirror. To be honest, Louise is quite excited to be able to look directly at his wishes, but also a little worried, because sometimes the wish is something that even he himself can't detect, and may even be unacceptable. In front of the mirror, Lewis's face was first reflected, and then slowly changed. Lewis's gaze changed as the picture in the mirror gradually became outrageous. A salted fish that looks like a stinky one flutters on the beach. Is this special? Lewis's face changed drastically. Isn't this bullying honest people? Who dreams of becoming a salted fish bouncing on the beach? Also, doesn't the Eris magic mirror show the mode of self plus dream? What about others? It's just a salted fish fluttering. Even if my ultimate dream is to mess up, I can't be so insulting. Lewis stared at the mirror, eager to smash it on the spot, but he couldn't compete with a mirror, which made him very unhappy. He wants to make trouble when he is not happy, but it is obviously not possible to do it in his own capacity. After all, in theory, he should not be in school now. Voldemort has been too quiet lately. Isn't he a villain? What is he doing so quietly, coming out to make trouble? So Lewis, who was in a bad mood, planned to arrange for Voldemort. How to arrange it? Lewis originally planned to let Diabrando play again, but after thinking about it, he felt reluctant or change Sichuan this time, just to see Sichuan's ability to make trouble. Thinking of this, Lewis directly called Chuan's name. Chuan. The on-call young lady appeared in front of Lewis. Master. Chuan bowed his head respectfully. Voldemort has been too quiet lately, Lewis said. Find him something to do. Any additional needs? Chuan asked. No, just let him move and make Dumbledore nervous. Lewis said casually, keep it simple. Don't make too much noise. Understood. Chuan immediately realized that his own master was bored and inconvenient to make trouble by himself, so he let others do it for him. Then give Voldemort some reasons to draw someone's attention away. Sounds good. Lewis's eyes lit up. But what are you going to let him do? It's simple. The owner just has to stand by. After Chuan finished speaking, he turned into a puddle of water and left, but before leaving, he left a sign for Lewis to guide the way. However, this sign seems to point to the Forbidden Forest outside the castle. Huh? Voldemort is not in the castle? Lewis took out the map he had taken from Peter Pettigrew and looked at it, and sure enough, the names of Voldemort and Quirrell were not in the castle. The Marauder's map can only show the names in the castle, and Kawa also thought of this and specially pointed out the way. Yes, this river will come. Lewis was very satisfied with the performance of his subordinates and followed the guidance all the way to the Forbidden Forest. Quirrell and Voldemort are in the Forbidden Forest for the simple reason that the small red bottle 3 times a day can no longer support Quirrell's rapidly decaying body, and he finally has to go on the road to sucking the unicorn's blood. Soon Lewis was led to Voldemort's hunting ground, and the first thing Lewis noticed was the pretty creature, a unicorn with white and crystal hair, a sturdy posture, and horns on top of its head pointing diagonally to the sky. It is taking a leisurely stroll. As a powerful magical creature, it has almost no natural predators in this forbidden forest. Even the 8-eyed 3 spiders dare not hunt unicorns. But today a fierce hunter came from the forbidden forest. In the dense forest, a pair of scarlet eyes stared at the pure unicorn, full of greed. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew through the leaves to attract the attention of the sensitive unicorn, and almost at the same time, a strange spider-like figure on the tree pounced on the unicorn. It was Quirrell, controlled by Voldemort. Quirrell's body was close to decay, and only Voldemort had the ability to control this body to hunt. Just when Lewis thought he could see the precious image of Voldemort fighting a unicorn, the frightened unicorn pouted his hooves. Then Voldemort was kicked out. Oh, what a shame. Lewis covered his face, almost unable to bear to look at it directly. Episode 115, Guess What You Draw. Plus, Ozzel. Unicorns are worthy of being powerful magical beasts, and they kick Voldemort out with a flick of their hooves. However, Voldemort is not easy to mess with. It is estimated that hunting unicorns has not been kicked in the past few days, and they have kicked out of experience. I saw that as soon as Voldemort landed, he bounced towards the unicorn for the second time, and this time the unicorn reacted in time, and was hugged by Voldemort's neck, and a wand was pointed under its head. Avada Kedavra the Great Witch. A miserable green light lit up at the unicorn's jaw, and the unicorn let out a scream, its front hooves raised, and silver blood spilled from its mouth and nose. Unicorns have very high magic resistance. Ordinary spells can't hurt it at all, even if it is a life spell. It is difficult to kill with one blow. That's why Voldemort used this close-to-face spell to operate. Even if Voldemort lost most of his power, his expertise in hunting was enough to compensate for his lack of strength. A beautiful unicorn died, and Voldemort lay on the ground, tearing at the unicorn's veins, gulping while the blood had not yet coagulated. The blood of unicorns can keep people alive, but it will be cursed and gradually fall into the pain of not being able to seek death. But Voldemort didn't care. He just wanted Quirrell to live, and what did Quirrell have to do with what suffering he had to do? Suddenly, Voldemort raised his head alertly and looked to the side, only to see a cloud of water rising from the dirt and turning into a beautiful human shape, and a long golden whip was wrapped around her hand, as if she was decorated with natural ornaments. The person who comes is Chuan. Voldemort? Your performance is really rough like the beast. Chuan did not speak to Voldemort as submissive and gentle as Lewis, but was extremely arrogant and cold. It's you again. Voldemort wiped the silver blood from the corner of his mouth. What are you doing here? Specifically to see me ugly? I don't have the spare time to watch a wild dog hunt. Chuan continued to poison his tongue. I just don't want to see the student I'm proctoring get killed by the exam questions. What crazy thing are you talking about? Although Chuan's tone made Voldemort angry, the information revealed in it made Voldemort particularly concerned. Hee, I think the principal of this school and some professors are doubting you and your career, and at this time, you still look indifferent. Are you waiting for them to discuss and arrest you? Chuan sneered. Lewis found that this Chuan was particularly suitable for this cold and arrogant image of the royal sister, and he was too docile in front of him, destroying this temperament. Voldemort broke out in a cold sweat after hearing this, and snorted coldly. What if you have doubts? As long as there is no evidence, they can't do anything about me, and I won't leave until I get what I want. So you're really stupid. Is it convenient for you to take the Philosopher's Stone if you are always being targeted like this? Chuan was condescending, and his blue eyes were full of disgust and disgust. What you have to do now is find a way to make your carrier less suspicious. Easy to say, what am I going to do? Voldemort questioned. The method you said is nothing more than to blame others to divert the target, but who else in this castle is worth doubting? That's your business. I'm just giving you a little idea. I have to think about everything. How good is it if I just take the Philosopher's Stone for you? Chuan Lung snorted. Figure it out for yourself. As soon as he finished speaking, the river turned into a puddle of water and disappeared as when he came. Voldemort looked at the disappearing river with jealousy, and once again felt the horror and danger from the organization of villains from all over the world united to become one family. Both the suspected leader of the organization, Diabrando, and the woman who called herself an examiner, made Voldemort feel in danger, and their abilities were strange and terrifying, but they didn't seem to be magic. And their men, the three men with average stealth ability, but stronger than the Death Eaters. Everyone who came out of this organization made Voldemort sleep. Although the name of this organization is funny to think about, your men make Voldemort further believe and fear your fabricated organization. Far-reaching. You have obtained fraud points, 500 points, current points, 94,000 points. You won a legendary lottery. Lewis once again received a legendary lottery, which can only be said to be worthy of Voldemort, although Voldemort's electric points in this state are less, but the extra legendary lottery is praised. Looking at Voldemort, who was lost in thought, Lewis touched his chin and suddenly felt that something was wrong. He simply wanted to do something, but he didn't know which direction to do it, so he called Chuan and gave her the task for her to watch and complete. Ask for flowers. Chuan knew which direction to do things, but it seemed that she didn't know exactly how to do it, so she simply told Voldemort the direction and asked him to think of specific methods. What kind of workplace routine is this? Lewis shook his head and cleared his head of strange thoughts. Let's draw the lottery, the legendary lottery. It's hard to come by before you really start the Voldemort Smash Brothers. Lying in bed, Lewis opened the legendary lottery with some excitement. The current draw is a legendary lottery. Number of draws consumed. Draw begins in the colorful brilliance. One after another ghost floats in front of him, and Lewis looks at those figures nervously, looking forward to the prize of his fifth lottery. The sword fairy flying with the imperial sword, the immortal covered in light, and even the blue tanuki cat that flashed by. Sleep, scare me. don't follow Doraemon. Lewis was startled and patted himself on the chest. If you draw Doraemon's props, although the Hogwarts range cannot be used, it can also benefit your own home. But if only he could have drawn his template, he would still be able to live the day. Just being afraid of rats is disgusting enough, not to mention the fate that may appear to assist waste firewood to live a happy life in the end. The prize was fixed on a tall figure that was too tall to make Lewis dumbfounded. He looked up and saw the familiar color scheme and familiar face, and suddenly felt bad. Hey! No way? Don't mess with me. With Lewis's scream, the figure turned into a streamer and fell into Lewis's hands, and at the same time, he also saw the intimate prompt of the system. You have obtained a legendary power-up, a divine light rod with the power of a giant of light. Lewis was expressionless, even with a slight collapse, looking at the familiar size and familiar appearance in his hand. That's right, the divine light rod can make the big bone boil into soup, a divine light stick that turns into light. Pit Daddy this is. Lewis's eyes were about to breathe fire, and he threw the divine light rod to the ground in anger. God Ultraman, I recognize you to a four-dimensional pocket. How good is the guest appearance of the blue tanuki? Let me become Digga. Do you see me like a person with light in his heart? Labor and management magic are all black chi. Episode 116, there is a problem with the wand. Press the switch to use, transform into a giant of light. This is the information given by the system. Well, Lewis still picked it up, although he is disgusted with his mouth. Who can refuse to become Ultraman? It's not impossible to become a Digga of light and become a black Digga, Lewis muttered as he tried to press the switch anyway. Ultraman transforms as much as he wants, and it is not impossible to transform indoors. The sides of the divine light rod unfolded, and a dazzling light shot out from it, but this light seemed to have no root water, and it disappeared after not blooming for a while. Lewis was dumbfounded, and patted the divine light stick in disbelief, wondering if there was something wrong with this thing, yet it still didn't react at all. Sure enough, this is a Pit Daddy thing, or lose it. Finally, the undead Lewis used spiritual power to analyze the structure of the divine light rod, although the principle of which he could not understand, but he found a part similar to the interface. Nature is not a substantive interface for recharging, but some kind of spiritual interface. This excuse connects the light in people's hearts, and turns those who are righteous in their hearts into giants of light. Because it is a special supply version of the system, there is no requirement to use it. So I have to have a large bone stew or something, but Lewis couldn't use it because he didn't have that bright spirit. Anyway, to sum up, Lewis is a bad guy who cuts through all black, and he can't use a magic light rod. In the original work, there was a person who incarnated Hediga with the help of instruments and divine light rods, but firstly, Lewis did not have the instrument and the ability to make instruments, and secondly, the system produced and explained very clearly, only the power of the giant of light, nothing else, and did not support other transformations. Legendary, solid waste. Lewis rolled his eyes and threw the divine light stick into the storage space. Now the mood is even more depressed, so depressed that I don't want to make trouble. Although depressed and didn't want to make trouble, Lewis couldn't really do nothing. Christmas is an important social holiday, and it is not good to not give gifts to friends as friends. So on the second day of the holiday, Lewis took his wand and planned to go to Diagon Alley. Gift giving is a science, and the same is true among wizards, and gifts are carefully chosen. Mr. Wilson, who is a magician on Christmas Eve, is very busy, and his business performance alone is enough for him to toss. So although he really wants to go to Diagon Alley again, he can only regret giving up if the conditions do not allow. And Mrs. Wilson still had to go to work and did not have time to accompany Lewis, so Lewis had to go by himself. Fortunately, Lewis was a very mature child from childhood to adulthood, and the Wilsons were very reassuring to him. What's more, Lewis is still a wizard now, so they are even more relieved. Obviously, they still don't know that young wizards can't use magic outside of school, and Lewis didn't say anything suspiciously. After all, he doesn't know the magic of this world, and the so-called traces are useless to him. With the keys and wallet in hand, Lewis left the house. The Dursleys across the street looked quite lively, probably after receiving Harry's letter, knowing that the freak would not be happy to spend the holiday with them. Huh, Lewis sneered. His body suddenly disappeared, and then a gust of wind was set off in place, and then calmed down. Snake charm, chicken charm, rabbit charm. Using all three spells at the same time allows Lewis to fly quickly without others seeing. This is not in line with the symbiosis of the charms, but now the restrictions are extremely weak when the 11 spells are all close to collapse after Lewis's day and night polishing. All the 12 spells except the only intact tiger charm were shattered, and it seemed that they could be completely destroyed and merged into one with only a little external force. At this moment, Lewis understood what the revelation he had received from observing celestial phenomena was in astronomy class at the beginning of school. It's the 12 charms. The so-called gathering sand into a tower and stagnating water into an abyss is to let the power of the 12 charms merge into one, becoming the power that Lewis can control at will rather than the external force from the charm. In the original work, why did the Holy Lord gather 12 spells, and when the seal was unsealed, it would be turned around by a certain dragon? Obviously there is an extremely fast rabbit charm, but restrained? It is because the 12 charms themselves are part of the sealing system. The so-called mutual birth and mutual restraint is actually the binding of the zodiac on the power of the Holy Lord by the healthy chi magic, and the tiger charm is more important than balancing the power of the charm after the 12 charms are gathered, balancing the inner body of the black chi and the balance of the shell of the healthy chi. Therefore, the tiger charm is the core of the 12 charms, and it is the point where the charm condenses the power of righteousness. Lewis has now solved 11 spells, but this is only half done, and the other half that is more difficult is on the tiger charm. However, it won't be long before Lewis estimates that he will be able to completely invade the righteous chain of the tiger charm and fuse the power of the 12 charms before the summer vacation arrives. I just don't know what kind of changes will happen then. In the blink of an eye, Lewis appeared on Charing Cross Street. As a Muggle, even with otherworldly magic and magic, he could not see through the Muggle expulsion curse in the future, but his spiritual power spread like a tide to all the locations in the block, helping him easily find the door of the leaky cauldron. Walking into the bar, it is still lively, and the owner of the bar, Tom, is directing the staff to set up the bar to add a little festive atmosphere. No one noticed Lewis, who was alone. Only occasionally someone would look at Lewis's top hat. Hogwarts was on holiday, and it was normal to have children here. Lewis squeezed through the crowd, went to the back door of the bar, pulled out his wand, and knocked on the special bricks on the wall. "What do you want to buy when you go to Diagon Alley?" After knocking, Lewis waited for the wall to open, while thinking about what kind of gifts to buy, but after a long time, Lewis felt that something was wrong, and the wall in front of him did not open. "Did you point out the wrong order?" Lewis looked at the wall suspiciously, a little dazed. At this time, there were footsteps behind him, and it was the other wizards who were heading to Diagon Alley. Lewis thought about it and immediately stood stealthily by the side, watching a wizard knock a few times around the bricks in order, exactly the same order as Lewis's knocks. The wall then opened, revealing the road to Diagon Alley 17. Lewis took the opportunity to walk in, but the doubts in his mind could not be dispersed like a cloud. Why can't I open the wall to the room of demand? Because he's a Muggle? No, you should only need a wand. Revealing his figure in a corner of Diagon Alley, Lewis watched his wand fall into deep thought. He suddenly recalled the scene where Peter Pettigrew sneaked up on him with his wand. The other party seemed to use the death spell, but it was unsuccessful, as if he would not have used the death spell at all. How could a person who is determined to kill use a spell that he can't? Something wrong with my wand? Lewis looked at his wand, raised his head, and looked at the square sentence of Ollivander's wand shop. He remembered the old man who had not been deceived by him. Episode 117, Dealing with Ollivander. Although it is not the beginning of school season, the Ollivander wand shop is still open. In addition to Ollivander himself taking care of making wands in the shop, he will also take on wand care commissions from some powerful wizards. This can be a significant expense, and often a maintenance is no less expensive than buying a brand new wand. As a respected wand maker, Garrick Ollivander has no lower status in the British wizarding world than Dumbledore, and this fee is naturally reasonable. Of course, in addition to the above reasons, occasionally someone will ask Ollivander to order a second wand, and this second wand is often used for backup. As for what to do, Ollivander doesn't care. Anyway, the price is more expensive, generally ranging from 50 galleons to 100, and those who come to buy a second wand do not care about this small money. This is also the reason why Ollivander's wand shop has not lost money until now. Those wand-making materials are not cheap, although some will be given away by someone, such as phoenix feathers, but most of them will cost a lot of galleon to buy. Garrick Ollivander is cleaning up the store, and he'll be out preparing the materials after a while. The new little wizard is about to start school, and he needs to 17 prepare all kinds of wands so that those young wizards can choose the wand that suits them better. Anyway, the old customers have been arranged, and no one should come to the door recently, Garrick Ollivander thought to himself. At this time, the doorbell at the door was pushed open and a little wizard wearing a strange top hat walked in. Ollivander didn't pay attention at first, but thought that the little wizard who was about to be of the right age was curious about the wand to come in to take a look. But he didn't expect to look up and see that it was actually an acquaintance. "I remember you, Wilson." "That's right, Lewis Wilson." Garrick Ollivander smiled. "Is there something?" Lewis took off his top hat and looked at the smiling old man in front of him. The corner of his eyes twitched. "You should know exactly why I'm here, right?" Lewis casually hung his hat on the coat rack. "I almost didn't come in from the leaky cauldron." Ollivander suddenly realized. "Oh, that's indeed a suitable place for identifying wands. I won't ask how you got in. I think it's also your secret." Without the slightest panic, Ollivander found a chair and a table from the cluttered shop. "Please sit down. Even if you are here to ask about the guilt, I can't be rude. Do you want something to drink?" "I suggest you drink some green tea, which will help lower your blood pressure for a while," Lewis said leisurely after sitting down. "It seems that you are planning to let me release some blood, but that is not important. In fact, I am more curious about what you are." Ollivander smiled and didn't mind Lewis's words in the slightest. "Me? I'm just an ordinary little wizard." Lewis looked around at his wands. "You should be quite profitable opening this wand shop, right?" "Just barely enough to make ends meet." Ollivander shook his head. "The wand sold normally is only enough for the material. 15 galleons for an empty shell wand material? Your hush money, can it be the same?" Ollivander said leisurely. You're really honest. Lewis pouted. There is no need to hide it. Ollivander said. You can rest assured, I don't have the habit of passing on secrets casually. Lewis looked at him suspiciously. Garrick Ollivander is a very disciplined person. He is really tight-lipped and unlike Hagrid, who grew up eating real drugs. Unless you torture to extract a confession. In the original work, Voldemort tortured him with a heart-drilling curse to force him to tell him the relationship between Voldemort's wand and Harry Potter's wand, and said that the most powerful wand was the Elder Wand. Usually it's okay, that is, the chain will be dropped at the critical moment, and I am afraid that it will be the material of a traitor in the past. What if Voldemort tortured him and shook his own affairs out as if he were pouring beans? Thinking of this, Lewis's eyes became dangerous when he looked at Ollivander. Don't think about killing me, with my identity, even if the Ministry of Magic is incompetent, it will be forced to track it down. A wand maker is not so easy to kill. Garrick Ollivander said meaningfully. Look at what you said, how dare I kill you? Lewis coughed awkwardly, and suddenly his expression became serious. Mr. Ollivander should be in his 60s this year, right? 72 years old, but this is nothing. If nothing else, I can live another 100 years. Ollivander poured himself a cup of tea. Oh, I almost forgot that wizards basically live for 200 years, unless they are hung up by accident in the middle. Lewis scratched his head and asked again. Does Mr. Ollivander have a desire for great power? I'm interested in powerful wands. I'm more interested in powerful people getting powerful wands. Ollivander shrugged. I don't care about myself. Gone. What a big salted fish. Lewis seemed to see a salted fish fluttering on the beach, and the salted fish mocked him with Ollivander's face. Just you Chingao, just you are amazing, give me a change. Lewis suddenly lost his patience and raised his hand to put a cloud of black gas on Ollivander's face. Ollivander was startled at first, and just wanted to resist when the whistling wind came from the back of his head, and then the back of his head shook, his eyes were dark, and he fainted. Lewis, who went around behind Ollivander at great speed, silently threw the pure gold mallet into the golden vortex beside him. Bah! Just you have a lot of things, is it okay to accept it honestly? You have to force me to make a move. Lewis pouted, but found that the black chi that could turn ordinary people into dark killers was isolated and could not penetrate Ollivander's body. It's really troublesome. 500 Lewis came to the door to put up a sign for the wand shop to close, and dragged Ollivander to the back of the wand shop. Then he took out a boiling crucible and began to operate. Now there can be another person under him. What is it called? Lewis stared at the unconscious Ollivander as he threw materials into the crucible. That's right, Lewis's method is to turn Ollivander into a dark killer and concoct him directly into his own. This way Lewis does not worry that his identity will go wrong. Be content. If it weren't for your fake wand that Peter Pettigrew didn't release the spell, I would definitely kill you. Lewis muttered and began to cast spells. He thought that it was too simple to kill someone without suspicion, and it was very simple to take out a Dior or simply let Chuan do it. No one would have thought that the person who commanded these two villains from all over the world united to become a family organization boss would be him. Louis. So killing people is simple, but Lewis finds it more interesting to use other methods. For example, how funny it would be to be slapped when Voldemort came to the door, intending to interrogate Ollivander. Episode 118, You Wake Up, Now You're Not Human. A thick black aura surrounded Ollivander's body, trying to invade and transform him. This process is not simple, and it is completely different from the trio of black gas wizard sword dragons who blacken cannon fodder when they raise their hands in the original work. After all, those three people plus the fourth black tiger Afyu are ordinary people, and Garrick Ollivander is a real wizard. Even if he was beaten to the point of coma, the magic power in his body resisted the erosion of black chi all the time, making it difficult to start with the pervasive black chi. The blackening process seems to be going nowhere, but Lewis is in no hurry at all, because he has an alternative. After 10 minutes of uncontrollable state, Lewis began to choose a plan, and the manipulation of black gas became rough, and he manipulated several streams of black gas to penetrate from Ollivander's limbs and violently destroy Ollivander's physical body. This kind of behavior is not a silent erosion of moistening, but a violent contamination. In the absence of conscious control, the magic power could not stop the black chi from attacking the city, and after a while, the black chi occupied most of Ollivander's body. But this violent method also put the already old Ollivander in a state of near death. However, dying is not a big deal in Lewis's opinion. He only needs to maintain the output of black chi while treating Ollivander's physical injuries with a horse charm. In the process of destroying and rebuilding, a wisp of black gas fused with Ollivander's muscles and blood vessels, unknowingly transforming Ollivander towards the place Lewis wanted. In the process, Ollivander's muscles swell, and the folded skin is stretched and smoothed at the same time. His skin was also dyed bronzed, and light blue energy lines slowly emerged. At this time, Ollivander was rapidly transforming towards the form of the Dark Killer, and the magic power that protected Ollivander and resisted the black gas was forced back all the way. The magic power retreated, and soon gathered on Ollivander's head. In the process Lewis sweated profusely, and the black gas consumption in his body was greater than he expected. But fortunately, it can be supported, and it is close to the final step. At this time, as long as Lewis used the power of the dog charm to keep Ollivander from dying at the moment of the black chi empowerment, this transformation would be completed. Lewis didn't do that, though. He stopped the continued erosion of black chi, but dredged the black chi on Ollivander's body, making them hidden under the skin and thus more concealed. Under the guidance of Lewis, Ollivander's body color gradually recovered, and the energy light band also dissipated, but the swelling muscles and tight skin did not fade, still showing his explosive power. The reason why Lewis did not use black gas empowerment was to prevent Ollivander's brain from being washed away. As a wandmaker, Ollivander's wisdom and experience are more important than his life. If he loses these, Ollivander is not Ollivander, and there is no point in leaving such a waste. Keep Ollivander's head and focus on transforming his body's affinity with black chi so that his appearance does not change much, so that while maintaining control over Ollivander, his wisdom and spirit can be preserved intact. Lewis doesn't need a wand, but it's always a good thing to have such a master wand maker under his command. And I also need a wand that I can use myself, well, the cane. Black gas magic will increase if there is a professional wand auxiliary power and casting speed, so he needs Ollivander's knowledge to help him transform a wand that suits him. When the last step was completed, Lewis breathed a sigh of relief, and the black chi in his body was basically exhausted, making him feel a sense of weakness that his body was empty. But that's just an illusion. With 12 spells, he can still kill a cow with one punch. Putting away the ceremonial materials, Lewis sat down in a chair and poured himself a slightly cool cup of green tea. He drank tea while waiting for Ollivander to wake up. It took about half an hour before Ollivander slowly woke up, and as soon as he opened his eyes, he let out a chuckle. He felt that his dripping eyes were different, and some minor problems in his eyes caused by years of research and making wands were all healed before he could experience them carefully. He felt that something was wrong, and he actually fell to the ground. What happened? Ollivander hurriedly got up from the ground, and the dexterous body made him stunned for a long time, and then he noticed Lewis sitting and drinking tea, and the memory in his mind gradually emerged. It's you. Ollivander looked at Lewis with wide eyes. You knocked me unconscious, and then what did you do? The lines sound a little bad, and the words come out of the mouth of an old man in his 70s. Lewis rolled his eyes and said to Ollivander, just say how you feel now. Well, good, never been better. Ollivander used 3 good at once. He moved his limbs, no longer felt like he was about to die, and his fingers became more dexterous than before. This takes his wand crafting to the next level. The wand is a delicate work of precision and experience, but many times the wand maker is young and has more precision but lack experience, and when he is old, he has rich experience but is not enough, and the peak period is only a short dozen years. Of course, there are also some wastes from young to old age that are not enough and nothing. Now Ollivander feels that his body is back to his youth, but his wisdom and experience are still the same. And I don't know if it's an illusion. Ollivander feels that his brain is much brighter than when he was younger. But how did you do it? Ollivander looked at Lewis as if he were looking at some rare animal. You gave me a bath with a blessing elixir? The elixir is a legendary potion that can make people get good luck, but in fact, its role is to make people burst with inspiration, become stronger and more cheerful, and give full play to various abilities, making themselves super long to play the magic buff potion. It's just that the elixir can't do rejuvenation. It can make people play beyond normal but can't make people return to the peak. What exactly did this amazing young man in front of him do? You're curious, Lewis said. Really want to know? He had a mysterious smile on his face. Whether you tell me or not, you are my closest friend from now on, Ollivander said categorically. Don't be angry when you say it, Lewis said with a smile. Congratulations, you are not many people anymore. From the moment you wake up. Episode 119, Dark Killer Ollivander. It's not person? Ollivander was confused. The physical strengthening after becoming a dark killer naturally goes without saying. Dark killers are all good men who can run horses on their arms and stand people with fists. Killing tigers with 3 punches is not a problem. Ordinary wizards can put an iron armor spell through with 1 punch, 2 punches stunned, and 3 punches are directly sent to the West Heaven. In addition to physical strengthening, what is more important is the enhancement of magic power by chance. Under the pressure of black chi, the magic power of Ollivander's whole body was all concentrated in the brain position, which not only strengthened his brain power, but also made the control of magic power handy. In addition to strengthening, the Dark Killer is basically immortal. As long as the Black Gas Mage does not die, the Dark Killer will not die. So although your life and death are in my hands, I can still torture you at any time, but you have gained unimaginable power, and you have earned it after careful calculation. Lewis sat in front of Ollivander and drank tea leisurely, and poured some for Ollivander. Come, drink some green tea to lower blood pressure. Ollivander's face was twitching, and his blood pressure was rising sluggishly, but he was not dizzy at all now. And the blood pressure that used to make him a cerebral hemorrhage was now just sprinkling water. At this point, it is irreparable. Ollivander can only sigh helplessly and say, these 410 times are a big loss. You don't lose, under normal circumstances. I don't want to plot your family property, how you should get it, I won't blindly command. Lewis waved his hand. You have to understand that I am doing this. I am just trying to ensure my personal safety. Ollivander rolled his eyes. By the way, can you customize a wand for me? Lewis asked. It doesn't have to be your kind, it's a little longer. It's better if it can have a little stretch function. Don't make trouble. Are you talking about a wand? Isn't that a cane? Ollivander glared at Lewis. You just said you didn't command blindly. This is a reasonable request from the customer, who let you trick me 15 galleons with a fake wand. Lewis shrugged. You're kind enough to say that for these 15 galleons. I accompanied my entire fortune into it. Ollivander was about to explode. Be calm and show the demeanor you have when you want someone else. Lewis Pye took a sip of tea. I'm not kidding. I do need a wand. You don't know magic. You don't have that talent. You don't need magic. What do you want a wand for? Ollivander felt that Lewis was weird, as if there was some serious illness. Is your power terrifying enough to still pretend to be a child there? Ollivander thought that Lewis would not be the old wizard rejuvenating and deceiving. What I need is a wand that suits my black gas magic. A cloud of black gas from Lewis's hand immediately made the overly nervous Ollivander stand up. What are you panicking? I don't confuse your face. Lewis rolled his eyes. That's what you just pasted my face. Ollivander blew his beard and glared, but sat down without much thought because he was transformed into a dark killer. He has a natural affinity for black chi and is not too afraid. Anyway, I need a wand that can guide black chi. Lewis dispersed the black gas in his hand. You have both black energy and magic powers, as well as a talent for making wands, which should not be difficult for you. Well, the design is not difficult. The main thing is the stability of the finished product. Speaking of his profession, Ollivander immediately became reliable. Since you said everything, then I will do it. Rest assured, I will definitely make you a perfect wand. With that, he stood up as if he was ready to go to work. You wait, don't need to measure the value? Lewis was dumbfounded, and his heart said that you old thing won't fool me anymore, right? Before choosing a magic wand and measuring the distance between the nostrils, now why don't you want anything? Oh, the wand and the value I measured are generally useless, it's fun, Ollivander said casually. Sleeping. Lewis looked at the busy Ollivander speechlessly, thought about it and said, don't bother with your wand, remember to exercise your abilities. That thing has time to talk about it. Ollivander, who has entered the working state, waved his hand and drove people very dashingly. You go quickly, don't disturb my work. I'm a special. Lewis rolled his eyes. Is this looking for a subordinate or a grandfather? Yes, if his subordinates work hard to generate income, they can't interfere with him to create benefits for themselves, right? Or a slippery walk. No, you can't leave yet. Lewis suddenly remembered something. Garrick, do you have a channel to buy and sell materials for fantastic beasts? Yes, there are a lot of them. What do you ask this for? Ollivander said casually. Oh, I have a batch of long-term supply of 8-eyed giant spider venom. You help me sell it, and give you some points when I turn back. Lewis said. A steady supply of 8-eyed giant spider venom? Ollivander turned and looked up at Lewis. Is there a sample? Show me. Give. Lewis casually threw Ollivander a bottle with venom. Ollivander deftly grabbed the bottle and crushed it instantly. Venom was sprinkled on his hands and floor, and corroded white smoke suddenly emitted. It seems that you also need to train and adapt to your body before making a magic wand, Lewis said as he looked at Ollivander, whose arm was rapidly becoming black and fading rapidly. You're right. Ollivander nodded and glanced at his hand, where the toxin-infested part was rapidly disappearing. I really should get used to this amazing body first, and I feel that I can be a little bolder in my future experiments. That's your freedom. Lewis again took out a bottle of 8-eyed giant spider venom, which he had collected for several days in a row, and there were more than 20 bottles in his storage space. Do you still want to look at the quality? No need, I've already felt it directly. Ollivander pointed to his hand. The quality is good, about 120 galleons a pint from my channel, which is not very expensive. After all, most of my channels come from human favors, and the price of each other is not high. Not bad. Lewis nodded after listening, and Ollivander's channel won steadily. Then you sold them all for me. He took out 20 bottles and placed them in front of Ollivander. That's all, 22 in total, a bottle of a pint. Ollivander crushed one, and 21 valued at 2,520 galleons. So much? Ollivander was taken aback. Where did you find so many 8-eyed giant spiders? Forbidden Forest. There is such a dangerous thing in the Forbidden Forest of Hogwarts? Ollivander's eyes widened. Dangerous? It's okay, it's not out in the depths of the Forbidden Forest. Well, when I didn't say, they're not dangerous to you anywhere. Episode 120 will be Stealthy Invisibility book. Soon, Lewis and Ollivander finalized a share of the sales of the 8-eyed giant spider Louis 10%, Ollivander 0%. It wasn't that Lewis was too harsh, but that Ollivander himself asked for it. It's useless for me to galleon. If you see any good wand material, find me some. Huh, Ollivander said. The fangs of the 8-eyed giant spider, the fluff on the arthropods are okay. This is also for yourself. After all, I have not made the black gas wand you said, but it is impossible to use phoenix feathers or unicorn tail feathers no matter how you think about it. I'll pay attention. What can Lewis say? After all, his own subordinates don't even want a salary. By the way, do you have galleons here? Give me a little advance, and the venom is sold out and you deduct yourself. You can't buy gifts too shabby. Maybe the little galleon on him is really not enough. He originally planned to go to Overturn Alley to sell the 8-eyed giant spider venom for some quick money, but now the venom is all given to Ollivander, and he can only pay from him. Boom. A large bag of galleon was thrown in front of Lewis. That's all. Ollivander looked at money like dung. Take it all. I don't need it. That's daring. Lewis was also worried that he would not have enough money when he bought gifts, and there was no need to worry about such a large amount of galleons. Push the door and leave Ollivander's wand shop, and you can feel the complicated emotions in Ollivander's heart before going out. The Dark Slayer has no secrets in front of his master, and any thought that might reveal Lewis's secrets will attract Lewis's attention. What's more, Lewis also saw the future, clairvoyance, countless possibilities that he did not see the scene of Ollivander's betrayal. Garrick Ollivander is a smart man, and he's not greedy. All his passion is invested in his wand, and he's safe. Lewis was pleased with the newbie. It's time to choose a gift. Lewis now has money in his hands, and he is not panicked, and plans to pick out some suitable gifts for Hermione. Words to Hermione. Sure enough, it's still a book. Thinking so, Lewis turned his head and went to the Lycan bookstore. Diagon Alley has two very famous bookstores. One is Lycan Bookstore, which is very complete with books, most of which are new editions, and are the most popular with new students. There is also a simple second-hand bookstore, specializing in selling used books, broken books. The quality of the books will be incomplete but cheap, and if you are lucky, you may find cherished old books here. The probability is very low, but to buy gifts, you still have to go to Lycan Bookstore, otherwise it will seem very perfunctory, and giving gifts is more annoying than not giving gifts. Compared to the last time I came to Lycan Bookstore, it looks a little neat and disgraced, but just like that, all kinds of books are sorted and stacked, instead of neatly placed on the shelves. The owner of Lycan Bookstore is a woman who is not very careful. She just glanced up at Lewis and saw that it was a child, so she looked down and ignored him. Lewis was also unimpressed, walked over and knocked on the counter. Is there a suitable book for Christmas gifts? Discovering that it was really a customer, the bookstore owner was a little more enthusiastic, but that's it. If it's a gift, I recommend Mr. Gilderoy Lockhart's books, which are rare pieces. Gilderoy Lockhart? Lewis has a strange expression, that liar? But although Gilderoy Lockhart is a liar, his knowledge in books is not, and he is a good writer. At least writing novels is great, and skillfully grafting other people's experiences onto his own. It's a pity that those wizards who could have made great contributions to wizarding society, their life's efforts were wasted in Lockhart's hands, and that guy was a crappy wizard comparable to a squib, unable to use that valuable knowledge at all. Of course, Lewis couldn't use it either, so he planned to ignore the liar. Hello, please wrap me a set of Mr. Lockhart's books. Lewis, who has deep pockets, said lightly, this is big business. The owner of Lycan Bookstore's eyes lit up when he heard this, and he quickly enthusiastically packaged these books for Lewis. Lockhart's books are not cheap, a series with werewolf, witch, snowman, female ghost, ghouls, vampire. The Giant's Adventure series are all 5 galleons. There is also a teaser board in the bookstore, and Lockhart's new book I Can Magic is expected to be released next summer, which is more expensive and costs 10 galleons. A total of 35 galleons, which is not a small amount, and the weekly salary of Hogwarts professors is only more than 50 galleons. Lewis paid without blinking, and the boss looked very happy and gave Lewis a book. By the way, this is the Invisibility Book of Invisibility, which is considered a giveaway. The bookstore owner smiled brightly and put an empty copy on Lewis's gift. Ask for flowers. Lewis? What is this? The Emperor's new book? Lewis looked at the bookstore owner and saw that she didn't mean to joke, so he reached out and touched it. There was indeed a book there, a completely invisible book that had been subjected to superb stealth. 80% of the people who wrote this book have a serious illness. Lewis flipped through the transparent book, and could only hear the sound of turning the pages and the wind of the pages turning. But don't say anything, Lewis couldn't see a single piece of paper. Now it looks like Lewis is a clown who performs a comedy without props. This book is very precious. It records the advanced knowledge of the Phantom Body Curse. As long as you read it, you can definitely become a master of the Phantom Body Curse. The owner of Lycan Bookstore gave a thumbs up. The premise is to see through the stealth on the book. Whoever can see through this invisibility technique and his knowledge of the Phantom spell probably won't need the knowledge in this book. Lewis rolled his eyes. Sure enough, the author of this book is sick. Well, that's true. The bookstore owner is ashamed. This book is not easy to sell, and it is not easy to find. I originally entered 3, and now I have this one left. What? Can you sell 2 more copies of this book? Lewis was shocked, and some wondered if the person who bought the book was also sick. Not really, the main thing is that you can't find them. The bookstore owner spread his hands helplessly. I don't remember where I put them. Cow batch. Lewis can only pay tribute to the owner of this book. This is really a cow and loves to play. Lewis will play this way when he has the opportunity in the future. After buying the book, Lewis prepared to go to the Owl Post Office to mail it. The Owl Post Office is a place that specializes in letter delivery and home delivery, that is, renting owls. However, on the way to the Owl Post Office, Lewis saw the Quidditch franchise again, and after thinking about it, he felt that he still had to give Harry Potter a little kindness, and promised Dumbledore to take care of him. Then he went in and bought a broom maintenance kit, intending to send it to Harry as a gift. Harry sent it all and brought one to Ron by the way, and Lewis picked out a box of weird beans and wrapped them up for him and sent them together. Just pity him pills.